Joe Biden has withdrawn from the U.S. presidential race. Kamala Harris is the Democratic frontrunner. She's pulling in the money, but can she secure her party's nomination? We'll discuss the hurdles in her path, tell you about her political journey and how the odds are stacked in the battle against Donald Trump. Plus, what made Biden finally change his mind? A detailed breakdown of the weekend that changed this election. What next for the president? What does his legacy look like? And what will be Trump's strategy now? We'll cover all of this and more. In West Asia, a new battlefront, a new cycle of violence. It's Israel versus the Houthis in Yemen exchanging airstrikes. In India, it's budget day tomorrow. The economic survey talks about jobs, artificial intelligence, China, and the impact of social media on our growth. The big crypto hack, $230 million stolen from WazirX. They've announced a bounty to recover the amount. In Europe, thousands are protesting against overtourism. They want your money, but they don't want you. Is there a way out? And Karnataka debates a 14-hour workday. Is it even legal? We'll tell you the headlines first. Protests suspended in Bangladesh for 48 hours over the rising death toll. This decision was taken by the student group leading the demonstrations. More than 150 people have been killed so far. A curfew has been imposed across the country. On Sunday, Bangladesh's Supreme Court scaled back the controversial job quota system that triggered the unrest. Pakistan police raid the headquarters of Imran Khan's party. Islamabad police arrest the party's chairman and the information secretary. It comes a week after the Shehbaz Sharif government vowed to ban Imran Khan's PTI. The former prime minister has been in jail for nearly a year. Is Uganda going the Kenya way? Protesters plan to go ahead with an anti-corruption march tomorrow. The police have banned the march planned in capital Kampala. President Museveni says the protesters are quote-unquote playing with fire. He has ruled the East African country with an iron fist since 1986. Taiwan remodeled its war games amid threats from China. The exercise aims to realistically simulate an attack from Beijing. Taiwan's military discards drills deemed to be out of touch. China claims the self-ruled island as part of its territory. In recent months, Beijing has increased its military presence around Taiwan. And Ukraine's foreign minister to visit China tomorrow. The talks will focus on ending Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Last month, Russia was not invited to the Ukraine Peace Summit held in Switzerland. Beijing, a close political and economic ally of Moscow, also did not attend the summit. It has finally happened. Joe Biden is out of the race. He brazened it out for weeks. Then on Sunday, he stood down and endorsed Kamala Harris, the U.S. Vice President. She will replace Biden as the front-runner for the Democratic Party for this upcoming election. She has the support of a number of Democrats. She's also getting the donors. In less than 24 hours, Kamala Harris has raised millions of dollars for her campaign. What she needs now is a party nomination for her to be officially declared as the Democratic candidate. And that won't be easy. Tonight, we'll discuss why. How Biden's exit, though expected, has completely changed this election. And we start by discussing what happens now. The Democratic Party is in disarray. Biden has left at the 11th hour. Nothing like this has ever happened before. No candidate has left the race this late. Joe Biden is the first sitting president to step down in this manner. He was not officially nominated by his party, but he was expected to contest the election. So first of all, his party will have to get their act together now. They don't have much time, just a little over 100 days to regroup, to name a new ticket, to revive the campaign and to fight Donald Trump. It's a formidable challenge. Some Democrats are still coming to terms with what has happened, while Biden is still in isolation. He's recovering from a Wuhan virus infection. He made this announcement from isolation. For 3 weeks, he resisted a growing chorus of Democrats who were urging him to step aside. Until yesterday morning, a number of Biden's close aides still believed that the president was very much in the race and willing to fight it out. But by afternoon, everything changed. Biden first called up Kamala Harris, then he summoned his team, and as he was speaking with them, this letter was released on social media, apparently written by the president himself, announcing his exit from the electoral race. Here is what he wrote, and I'm quoting, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." A wide range of Democratic voters have welcomed this announcement.
I think that it was a brave decision for him to step down, well, to pull himself out of the race.
Like, it makes sense. I mean, I'm a Democrat. I think you kind of sort of have to do whatever it takes to try to beat Trump, just given kind of what he represents and how damaging a Trump presidency could be from my perspective.
A few minutes later, Biden released a follow-up message, a few minutes after he announced that he was stepping out of the race, and he endorsed Kamala Harris, who was then quick to respond and thank Joe Biden for the endorsement. Here is what she said. "My intention is to earn and win this nomination." Her team wasted no time after this. They do not have the luxury to waste time. Barely hours after the announcement, they started making phone calls to secure endorsements from other Democrats. Harris soon had the support of several high-profile leaders of her party like Bill and Hillary Clinton, California Governor Gavin Newsom, and Transport Secretary Pete Buttigieg, just to name a few.
I'm endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris because she's ready to step up, bring our party together, go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump, and win in November.
The support for Kamala Harris is growing. All 50 state chairs of the Democratic Party back her, all 50 of them. She also has endorsements from more than 150 Democratic lawmakers in the U.S. Congress and governors in Democratic states ruled by the Democratic Party. Plus the donors, they're backing Kamala Harris. In less than 24 hours, she has raised more than $50 million in grassroots donations. And that's not all. She'll also get access to Biden's war chest. That's another $90 million in cash. Hours after the announcement, her campaign team moved the Federal Election Commission. This is the agency that oversees elections in the United States. The Biden-Harris campaign would be redesignated now. This is like changing your account name. Earlier, these funds were in the name of Biden and Harris. Biden was the presidential candidate, Harris the vice presidential candidate. Now it would go to Harris and whoever she picks for the VP ticket. But access to campaign funds is not the biggest challenge for Kamala Harris at this point. Her greatest hurdle is securing the party nomination. She has to be officially nominated by her party, and the path to this is not easy. Harris still has a lot of boxes to tick here. For starters, some senior Democrats are still sitting on the sidelines. They haven't endorsed Kamala Harris. Leaders like Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries. These are influential voices within the party. Harris needs to win them over. That's the first hurdle. Next, she must ensure that there are no challengers in the party. The Democratic convention is slated for next month, the 19th of August. With Biden now out of the picture, it's an open contest. There will be almost 4,000 delegates at the convention, free to vote as they please.
In this case, since President Biden has announced he's not running, they are free in every sense of the word to get behind whoever they choose. So what we will see is, I mean, this is an unprecedented process, at least in recent history. And we will see a process by which these delegates will have to choose who will be the Democratic nominee.
Earlier, they were all backing Biden unanimously. But now, if there are multiple candidates in the fray in the Democratic Party, the delegates may be divided. What does one need to challenge Kamala Harris for the nomination? 300 votes. That's all that you need. 300 out of 4,000 votes. If a leader secures these 300 votes, they can throw their hat in the ring. They can contest the Democratic nomination. This is what you call an open convention. It's a possibility. So far, no one has challenged Harris, but she cannot afford any last-minute surprises. So she needs to lock in the delegates well before the convention. That's the second hurdle. And finally, she must find a running mate. her vice presidential pick. It's one of the most important decisions that she will take. So who will be her deputy? Quite a few names are doing the rounds, like Roy Cooper from North Carolina, Mark Kelly from Arizona, J.B. Pritzker from Illinois, Andy Beshear from Kentucky, and Gretchen Whitmer from Michigan. Now, usually a candidate has months to decide whom to pick, but Kamala Harris will have to take this call within days. And once she's done with all of this, she will have to find a winning strategy to beat Donald Trump, who is already, by the way, playing down her candidacy. Trump says Harris would be easier to defeat than Joe Biden. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Kamala Harris. She has a chance to become the president of the United States, but to do this, she will have to overcome incredible odds.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
But there's more to do, and I'm reluctant to walk away from that.
I am running, and we're going to win.
And I think I'm the best qualified to win. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
When you get knocked down, you get back up.
So Biden's out of the race, but what convinced him to drop out? What changed his mind? Even on Friday, his campaign was motoring on. His advisors said that Biden would stay in the race. But then on Sunday, the big announcement came. So what changed in those 48 hours? Well, Biden was not at the White House this weekend. He was in his hometown, Delaware. He was still recovering from his Wuhan virus symptoms. With him were a handful of supporters, like White House counselor Steve Ricchetti, campaign advisor Mike Donnellan, Deputy Chief of Staff Annie Tomasini, and Jill Biden's advisor Anthony Bernal. They were taking stock of the campaign, and the news wasn't good. Donations were drying up, big names were urging Biden to step down, and Trump was riding high. So on Saturday evening, they looked at some poll numbers. Again, nothing good. Trump was building on his lead in swing states, and that apparently was the final nail in the coffin. Reports say Biden had made up his mind by Saturday night. He had decided to pull out by Saturday night. The next day, on Sunday, he held another round of talks, sort of like a last-minute check. And then he broke the news. Joe Biden first called Vice President Kamala Harris. He informed her of his decision. Then he called his White House Chief of Staff. At around 1:45 p.m. local time, Biden's team was informed of the decision. Around the same time, this letter was posted on X. And just like that, Joe Biden's campaign was over. I guess it was the perfect storm. Recovering from an illness miles away from the White House and surrounded by family, it probably cleared the president's mind. Maybe helped him see the writing on the wall. It was definitely a weekend that changed U.S. politics. But getting here was tough, a mix of fate, politics, and narratives. This time last month, Biden was the undisputed nominee. He was neck and neck with Donald Trump, but in 25 days, he lost the White House. Let's look at the key events in that time. In April, Joe Biden proposed a televised debate with Trump. Normally, these debates would happen after the convention. But Biden said, let's have it before. In hindsight, that decision burned his campaign. The debate was held on the 27th of June, and Biden's performance was a disaster. He looked weak and tired. His voice was raspy and low, and his sentences often made no sense. That was a wake-up call for Democrats. They realized that Biden's health had deteriorated, so the party rebellion began. At first, it was state leaders and congressmen. None of the bigwigs joined in. They wanted to see where things went. And Joe Biden dug in. He admitted that he wasn't young or energetic, but he vowed to push on.
Folks, let me close with this. I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know. Folks, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done.
Biden went into damage control. He started giving more interviews on TV. He also began talking up the NATO summit. Washington hosted this meeting earlier this month, the NATO summit. So all eyes were on Joe Biden. Would the president redeem himself, or would he stumble again? Take a look at what happened.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Thank you so much.
After that, the floodgates opened. Hollywood actor George Clooney joined the rebellion. He's a top Democratic donor. He asked Biden to step aside. That's when the second key event happened, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. It sharpened the contrast between the two men. Trump was defiant after the shooting. He got up, he pumped his fist, and he shouted, "Fight." You couldn't imagine Biden doing that. Which brings us to the third key event that turned the tide. The party bigwigs got involved. Among them, two names stand out. First is former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The second is Barack Obama. Both of them have worked closely with Joe Biden. They're also very popular among voters. Neither of them went public with their views. Instead, they leaked reports to the US media. Obama's comments came last week. He said Biden's path to re-election had diminished. That's the term he used, which brings us to the weekend. This weekend, Biden had just two choices: ignore the rebellion and stay on, or give in to party pressure. The first option, staying on, would have been incredibly risky. Maybe a charismatic candidate could have fought alone, used his own brand to stay in the race, but not Joe Biden. He would have needed party support to take on Donald Trump. Plus, this was his last chance. A loss would have destroyed his legacy. So in the end, Biden made the only decision that made sense. He stepped aside.
But while I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last. Because every little girl watching tonight sees that this is a country of possibilities. And yes, it is an office with a long-standing reputation as one of the best in the country. I do.
Now you got some.
I, Kamala Harris, do solemnly swear.
The focus has shifted to Kamala Harris. Biden has endorsed her. She is his vice president. Now he wants her to be the Democratic nominee. Logistically, she's the natural heir. But as we've discussed, the path may not be so easy. And yet, Kamala Harris is no stranger to difficult journeys. She was born in 1964 in California. Both her parents were immigrants. Her mother was Indian, her father was Jamaican. Both had come to America for education. When Kamala Harris was 7, her parents got divorced. She was raised mostly by her mother, Shamila Gopalan Harris. She visited India as a child and grew up close to her Indian heritage. But she was also close to her black identity. She went to study at Howard University, one of America's premier black colleges. That's where she delved into politics and civil rights. After that, it was law school in San Francisco and a job at the district attorney's office. All was going well, but Kamala Harris wanted to do more. So in 2003, the year 2003, she ran for district attorney. It was quite successful, a campaign, and Harris won. She became the first black woman to be elected district attorney in California. That's the first glass ceiling that she shattered. In 2010, she ran for California Attorney General. People did not think that she would win, but she did. Interestingly, Donald Trump donated to her campaign. He gave $5,000 in 2011 and $1,000 in 2013 to Kamala Harris. She was the first woman to hold the job. So another glass ceiling broken. During the Obama presidency, there were rumors that she wanted to become a Supreme Court nominee. That did not happen. But in 2016, she became a senator and thus began her active political journey. In 2018, Harris became known for her sharp questioning. Multiple videos of hers went viral.
Impeccable memory. You've been speaking for almost 8 hours, I think more, with this committee about all sorts of things you remember. Yeah. How can you not remember whether or not you had a conversation about Robert Mueller or his investigation with anyone at that law firm? This investigation has only been going on for so long, sir.
So Harris decided to capitalize on this popularity and fame. In 2019, she ran for the presidency. Initially, she was a Democratic frontrunner. She sparred with Biden in the debates, but voters were unclear of her position on multiple issues. And by the end of the year, Harris ended her campaign. But she did not endorse Biden immediately. She waited until March of 2020 to do that. In August that year, Biden chose her as his running mate. And when they won, Kamala Harris made history.
We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
She became the first female U.S. vice president. She's the first black vice president. She's the first Asian American to serve as vice president. So it's a lot of firsts. And that's been Kamala Harris's whole life.
We have to know that sometimes people will open the door for you and leave it open. Sometimes they won't. And then you need to kick that door down. Excuse my language.
So can she kick down the door to the Oval Office? It will be very tough. Her appointment may have been historic, but Harris's term as vice president has been lackluster. She did not stand out. In the first year, her approval ratings were at 28%, which is lower than former Vice President Dick Cheney, and that's saying something. He was the architect of the Iraq War. Harris fared even worse than that. Although a lot of observers say that Harris was like a typical vice president. She backed Biden's policies. She wasn't in the spotlight very much. She defended him during the debate about his age. She did everything that a vice president is expected to do. So she's been a fair vice president. But will this resume be enough to cross the next hurdle? Can Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump? His campaign is already taking shots at her. They're saying that she will be easier to beat. But here's what the polls say. Donald Trump is at 48%. Kamala Harris is at 46%. Technically, she's trailing, but she's doing better than Joe Biden. Can she build on this? At this point, she's fighting on two fronts, one against Trump and the second against her own party. You see, the Democrats haven't been too sure of her. She's been criticized for her policies, for not being able to take a stand. Some Democrats believe she did not live up to the hype, that she lacks the charisma to lead the party. Regardless, they don't have much of a choice. Kamala Harris has Joe Biden's backing. Some top Democrats are rallying for her. She's raising money and she has a renewed support base. And she has time till August 19 to become the Democratic nominee. Biden has already tipped the scales in her favor. Now she must play all her cards right. Now, you know Kamala Harris, Biden's VP and heir apparent. Of course, her opponents also know her. They know her well because the Republicans have been preparing. They've been studying up in case this happened, in case Biden withdrew. The Republicans suspected that Harris could become the Democratic nominee, so they had some attacks ready. They even tried them out this weekend, even before Joe Biden threw in the towel. Take a look at this.
From the moment we take back the White House from crooked Joe Biden and Kamala, I call her Laughing Kamala. You ever watch her laugh? She's crazy. You know, you can tell a lot by her laugh. No, she's crazy. She's nuts.
But there's some bad news, actually. The Vice President, Kamala Harris, she doesn't like me. Kamala Harris said something to the effect that I have no loyalty to this country. Well, I don't know, Kamala. I did serve in the United States Marine Corps and build a business. What the hell have you done other than collect a check? What has she done other than collect a check from her political offices? And we have to give her credit, my friends. She did serve as border czar during the biggest disaster, open border that we've ever had in this country.
Both Trump and his running mate attacked Kamala Harris. Trump went for the personal attack. He called her crazy. He also said, and I'm quoting, "Harris will be easier to beat than Joe Biden would have been." Now, those are standard Trump moves, ridicule and mind games. His VP pick went the other way. J.D. Vance took aim at Kamala Harris's track record on migration. Kamala Harris is in charge of securing America's southern border from Central American migrants. In July 2021, she announced a new strategy to address the root causes of migration from Central America. It's been 3 years, and she hasn't been able to address those root causes. So expect the Trump campaign to hound Harris about this. Another line of attack is how Harris enabled Biden, and this too has begun. Republicans say that Kamala Harris covered up Joe Biden's frailty and pretended that everything was fine. Expect this to be a recurring theme over the next couple of months. There will be other attacks, personal attacks and attacks on her track record as vice president and as a prosecutor before that. This is what the Republicans will go after. It's almost guaranteed. But there's more to a US presidential race than just attacks. One of the other important factors is money. And yesterday, Kamala Harris got quite a bit of that. The Democratic Party received more than $50 million yesterday. In terms of donations, it was the biggest day for the party in at least 4 years. And this new war chest will be used against the Republicans, which is a problem for Trump. The Republicans were on course to surpass Democratic donations. Funding for Biden had dried up, especially after his disastrous debate against Trump. But now, Democratic supporters could be energized and more willing to loosen their purse strings. This might allow Harris to outspend Trump and reduce the popularity deficit in key swing states. Look at this poll from two battleground states, Pennsylvania and Virginia. It was conducted before Trump was shot, so it is a bit outdated. But one thing is clear here. Kamala Harris outperformed Joe Biden. The swing states leaned more towards the Democrats when Harris was the candidate. Trump has managed to create a gap between himself and Biden. That gap is narrower when he faces Harris. Add millions of dollars into that mix, and Trump could have a real challenge on his hands. But this does not mean that it will be smooth sailing for Harris. Remember, she's still polling behind Trump overall, and her rise will bring its own challenges, two in particular, racism and sexism. In its history, the US has elected only one African-American president, and that's Barack Obama. It has never elected an Asian American. Kamala Harris has a mix of both ancestries. Then there's the sexism. Only once before has a woman been a top US party's presidential candidate. That was Hillary Clinton back in 2016. And she too was defeated. She was defeated by none other than Donald Trump. Throughout the 2016 campaign, Clinton faced sexist attacks. There was a flood of sexist anti-Clinton merchandise. Kamala Harris may face the same, if not worse, especially if Trump decides to lead a sexist campaign. So will Trump and the Republicans employ those dark arts, or will their campaign only focus on the issues? We'll see over the next 105 days.
Thank you so much for bringing in all those details. We'll continue to track the story as the day progresses and we get more reactions on this. But this twist in race for White House after Biden steps down is really something to keep an eye on. But CNN News 18's Alistair D'Souza gets us more details on Biden's decision of dropping out and what it means for the Democrats. Let's listen in.
Joe Biden has ended his bid for a second term in the White House. In a statement, he said, "While it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down." Then came the official endorsement for Kamala Harris to step into his shoes. Biden has given Harris his full support. He said, "Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this." But Kamala Harris's path is not a done deal. Biden's endorsement does not automatically mean Harris has the job. Over the next coming days, Harris could well be challenged by members of the Democratic Party who feel the job should really be theirs. The reason, it is not the same process where if the US president steps aside, his vice president is next in line. This is a completely different scenario. No one becomes the official presidential nominee of a party until delegates vote. And here's the catch. Delegates are free to vote for any candidate they like. So what happens next? Firstly, a virtual roll call vote, which was slated for the first week of August to formally nominate Biden, could be cancelled. It might be too early for Kamala Harris to muster the support she needs for this vote, but there is no avoiding what comes next. The Democratic National Convention, which starts August 19th. Usually, these conventions are merely a formality.
Well, we are continuing.
It ain't over, man. We're just getting started.
Let me say it as simply as I can. Yes, I accept your nomination to run and serve with Barack Obama.
This also gives the internet one last chance to talk about our bromance.
You want to stand against violence in America? Then join me in getting these weapons of war off the streets of America. I'm a proud Democrat, but I will govern as an American president. I'll work as hard for those who didn't vote for me as those who did. Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now.
Biden's not in the race anymore, but he's still the US president. Elections are slated for November this year. A new president will take over in January 2025. So Joe Biden has 6 months left. He will be looking to end on a high, but the Republicans will make it hard for him. They've already turned up the pressure. The House Speaker wants Biden to resign as president. He says if you can't run for office, you can't stay on either. You must step aside. So expect a turbulent period. More so if Kamala Harris is nominated by the Democrats, which brings us to the campaign trail. Biden will have a role there. On the campaign trail, as president, his voice carries weight. Plus, his core supporters are still loyal to him. That's black and progressive voters. He will need to rally them for the Democratic nominee. And don't forget, the US is involved in 2 ongoing wars. Those conflicts won't pause for the US election, which means Biden remains a key player. But what about after January 2025? Chances are he will retire. Very few American presidents stay on in active politics. They mostly stick to seminars and speeches. Also, Biden is 81 years old, so it's hard to see another political innings for him, which raises a complicated question. What is Joe Biden's legacy? The first thing that stands out is longevity. Biden has been in politics for 52 years. He was elected to the US Senate in 1972. He was just 29 years old back then, so clearly an early bloomer. But Biden waited many decades to reach the White House. He spent 36 years as a senator, 8 years as vice president, and now 4 as president. like him or hate him, that's an impressive career. We can't focus on all of it, so let's focus on the presidency. Biden's 2020 campaign was a long shot. He finished 4th in the first Democratic caucus. But he did not give up. He snatched the Democratic nomination. He also did something rare in U.S. politics. He beat a sitting U.S. president and took over in January 2021. The U.S. was still reeling from the Wuhan virus pandemic. It was also coming to terms with the Capitol riots, an assault on American democracy. So Biden talked about healing and unity. His slogan was, "America's back." But did that translate into any success? Well, Biden did pass some major legislations, almost $2 trillion in pandemic aid, $1 trillion for infrastructure upgrade, $52 billion to make semiconductors in the U.S., and the Inflation Reduction Act. That last one is very important. It's the single biggest investment in green energy. On paper, this is all very impressive. Biden did not have a brutal majority in Congress. In fact, the Republicans captured the House in 2022. So passing these bills is a big tick. You're talking about structural investments here. It will take years, maybe decades to materialize. But that's what he did. Now we come to the failures. Biden wasn't able to solve America's gun crisis. Forget solving it. Former presidents are being shot at in campaign rallies, so the situation has gotten worse on his watch. But his biggest failures came abroad, which is strange because Biden is an old foreign policy hand. He served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So we assumed that Biden would ace it. As it turned out, he did not. He may have united European nations against Russia, but that unity hasn't really led to much. Russia occupies around 18% of Ukraine's land. The war has also upended supply chains around the world. So net-net, it's a failure. Same in Israel. Biden will always be remembered for his role in Gaza. He may have criticized Benjamin Netanyahu, but he kept shipping weapons. As a result, more than 38,000 Palestinians are dead. In West Asia, that will remain Biden's legacy, that of an enabler. And how can we forget Afghanistan? The United States spent 20 years fighting the Taliban. Afghan women had just started to enjoy their freedoms, but Joe Biden flushed it down the drain. His exit plan was a complete disaster, one that put the Taliban back in power. Now, Biden will argue that he was given a raw deal, but when you're president, the buck stops with you. So looking back, how do you sum up Joe Biden's legacy? He was certainly a fighter. He never gave up his dream to become U.S. president. He first tried in 1988, by the way, but no success. Then he tried again in 2007, but settled for vice president. And then he tried again in 2020. Among allies, he was a respected figure, mostly for his experience and gentle manners. Dozens of world leaders have also reacted to Biden's exit. All of them had great things to say about him. So it's easy to judge Biden the president, but it's not so easy to judge Biden the politician. In his own words, he was supposed to be a transitional leader, someone to beat Trump and then leave.
Look, I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else. There's an entire generation of leaders you saw stand behind me. They are the future of this country. They're the people who are going to.
So it all depends on the transition. If Democrats retain the White House, Biden's legacy will be sealed. His transition would be a success. But if they don't, things will be very different. No one will blame the Democratic nominee for the loss. They will blame Joe Biden. Now we turn to West Asia and the escalating conflict between Israel and Yemen, or rather, a Yemen-based group, the Houthis. They are armed rebels, much like Hamas in Gaza. The Houthis control Yemen, and they have been launching attacks from the country. For months now, they've been attacking ships in the Red Sea. Any vessel with a link to Israel is in danger here. This is to put pressure on Israel. This is to show solidarity with Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza. But on Friday, the matter escalated. A Houthi drone hit the Israeli city of Tel Aviv. It was an unprecedented strike, a Houthi strike inside Israel. And Israel could not leave it unanswered. So on Saturday, Israel struck back. Israeli jets conducted an airstrike inside Yemeni territory. And this has happened for the first time since the Gaza war began. And now the Houthis are not taking this sitting down, so they have vowed to retaliate, setting in motion another cycle of violence. Here's our report.
Those were the scenes from the Hodeidah port, the second largest port in Yemen. Israeli fighter jets struck the port on Saturday and the fires are still burning. This was Israel's first strike inside Yemeni territory, and it's a major escalation in the Israel-Hamas conflict. To understand this, let's take a look at the bigger picture. Yemen is home to the Houthi rebel group. It's an armed group like Hamas in Gaza or Hezbollah in Lebanon. All three groups are allied and they are all backed by Israel's greatest enemy, Iran. Collectively, the armed groups are known as the Axis of Resistance. And what do they resist? Israel and its Western backers. After the October 7th attack on Israel, the Houthis threw in their lot with Hamas and began fighting a proxy war against Israel by targeting ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis attack any ship that they think is linked to Israel. This has caused problems for global shipping. It has been going on since November, but on Friday, the Houthis managed to attack Israel directly. A Houthi drone hit a building in Tel Aviv. One person was killed and at least 10 were injured. Tel Aviv is Israel's commercial center. The Houthi drone attack took place barely 100 meters away from the US embassy in Tel Aviv. It was a major security failure for Israel and a symbolic victory for the Houthis. The Houthis then declared Tel Aviv a primary target. Israel could not have that. They're fighting a war in Gaza. They are constantly exchanging border fire with Hezbollah in the north. The last thing Israel wants is regular attacks from a third enemy. So Israel decided to send a message via airstrike. That's why the Hodeidah port is still ablaze.
This operation hit targets 1,800 kilometers from our borders. It makes it clear to our enemies that there is no place that the long arm of the State of Israel will not reach. The attack came in direct response to the drone attack in which an Israeli citizen was killed and other civilians were injured. It also followed the aggression of the Houthis against the State of Israel since the beginning of the war.
The goal was to deter further attacks, but it seems to have had the opposite effect. Yesterday, the Houthis struck again. They fired multiple missiles at Israel at the Red Sea port city of Eilat. Israel intercepted the missiles, but it doesn't mean that the danger has passed.
The Yemeni Houthi armed forces confirmed that they will respond to this flagrant aggression and they will not hesitate to strike the vital targets of the Israeli enemy, while reiterating that Tel Aviv is an unsafe area.
Before Friday's attack on Tel Aviv, Israel may have dismissed this as an empty threat, but now it needs to be on high alert. Another front seems to have opened in its war with Hamas. Will Israel be able to defend itself as it is attacked from all sides?
Tomorrow is budget day in India. There's a lot of buzz around what to expect. Populism, reforms, or a mix of both. What will it be? It will also be a record for the finance minister. This will be her 7th consecutive budget. The previous record was 6. As you know, before the budget comes the economic survey. Think of it as an annual report card. The survey covers the past financial year. It also gives projections for the future. The latest survey was tabled in Parliament today. So we're looking at the top highlights. Number 1, the growth projections. India's GDP is expected to grow by 6.5 to 7%, 6.5 to 7%. To put that in context, the GDP growth was 8.2% in the last financial year. But that was post-COVID growth. The pandemic had battered the economy, so last year was about revival, hence the 8% growth. Having said that, 6.5 and 7 is also quite impressive. China, for example, is projected to grow by just 5%, so India is well placed. Which brings us to highlight number 2, inflation. The survey says that prices are largely under control, but food inflation remains a problem. It was more than 9% last month. The economic survey has listed out reasons for this, for why the inflation is high, mainly weather and pandemic fallout. It says India's short-term inflation outlook is benign, meaning not a cause of concern. What about the long term? The survey has suggested a few measures like increasing oilseed production, better storage for vegetables and producing more pulses. This is the long-term map for India's fight against inflation. Let's look at highlight number 3, and that is jobs. It's a major concern for India. Around 30% of the country's graduates are unemployed. 30%. What does the survey say about that? Well, quite the opposite. The economic survey argues that India's job market is robust. Based on what? The PLFS, that's the Periodic Labour Force Survey. It says that India's youth unemployment has come down from almost 18% in 2018 to 10% now. The unemployment rate, 18% in 2018 to 10% now. That's what the economic survey says. It also says that more women have joined the workforce. But the survey does flag a major issue, and that is artificial intelligence. Listen to this, and I'm quoting, AI casts a huge pall of uncertainty as to its impact on workers across all skill levels, low, semi, and high. Now, this is a big statement to make, but it's also a debatable one because we don't know the level of AI penetration in India. We don't know how many companies are using it, to what extent, so it's tough to gauge the impact. Nonetheless, AI has made it to the Economic Survey of India, and that in itself is a big deal. Highlight number 4 is China, and this is very interesting. The survey calls it the Chinese conundrum. We've talked about factories and companies leaving China. We've also mentioned how India could benefit from this trend. But the economic survey has flagged a problem. Let me quote again. It may not be the most prudent approach to think that India can take up the slack from China, vacating certain spaces in manufacturing. And this is a big admission. The assumption was that India would gain from China's slowdown. But the survey says that's not guaranteed. In fact, it wants India to piggyback on China. Listen to what it says further. I'm quoting again. To boost Indian manufacturing and plug India into the global supply chain, it is inevitable that India plugs itself into China's supply chain. We'll need more clarity on this. China is India's biggest national security threat, yet this survey paints a different picture. It says China can be a key to India's growth. The question is, how will the Indian government strike this balance between economy and security? Now to the final highlight. It's a message to young Indians. Many of them have flagged issues like job loss and paper leaks. But this survey has advice for them. I'm quoting again, social media, screen time, sedentary habits, and unhealthy food are a lethal mix that can undermine public health and productivity and diminish India's economic potential. I will concede they have a point. Doom scrolling is not good for productivity, neither is eating fast food, but again the impact is debatable. There are more structural issues at play here, issues that only the government can address. Let's see what the budget will say about them. We'll be covering the proceedings live on First Post. Make sure you tune in for all the updates and analysis. Speaking of the budget, India's crypto industry has its own wish list for the budget. They would like to see a reduction in taxes. Currently, gains from cryptocurrency are taxed at 30% in India, but there are virtually no safeguards for those who invest in crypto. And this industry needs some urgent regulation. One of India's biggest crypto platforms was hacked. It is called WazirX. It has lost more than $230 million. That's about half the company's holdings. WazirX is now offering a bounty to anyone who can help them recover this money. Here's a report.
Imagine this. You wake up one morning, you open up your banking app on your phone, only to find it empty. All your savings are gone. Your bank balance is at zero. Last week, users of WazirX lived through this nightmare. WazirX is one of India's biggest cryptocurrency firms. It has 16 million users. The company suffered a major cyber attack. Crypto assets worth more than $230 million were stolen. That's about half of WazirX's total reserves. WazirX says the hack was beyond their control, a force majeure event. Temporarily, the platform has halted withdrawals, both in Indian rupees and cryptocurrencies. WazirX knows little about the hackers. It's offering a reward, a bounty of up to $23 million, to anyone who can help them recover the lost crypto assets. Going by one account, the Lazarus Group, a hacker group connected to the North Korean government, could be behind the hack. But WazirX is yet to confirm this claim. The hack couldn't have come at a worse time for this platform. Crypto trading on WazirX has dropped dramatically. Last year, the trading volumes decreased by 90%. This was after the Indian government introduced a crypto tax. All transactions are subject to a 1% tax deducted at source. Profits earned through cryptocurrencies attract a 30% tax. But it still remains tough to protect investor money, thanks to the nature of cryptocurrencies. Most of them are decentralized. They're not controlled by any institution or central bank, and they operate with a high degree of autonomy. This makes it challenging to stop hackers. India has been working on a law for cryptocurrencies. The bill is still in the pipeline, but without any global regulation, crypto investors lack a safety net. That's why such hacks have become more frequent. In 2022, crypto assets worth over $3.8 billion were stolen. In 2023, there were more hacks, but the losses reduced. Investors lost about $1.7 billion. Crypto platforms are trying to improve their security. But as the WazirX hack shows, nothing is foolproof. What should investors do then? Experts suggest that they can use offline wallets to protect their assets. These are more secure, since they're not always connected to the internet. Investors could also diversify their portfolios and only invest what they can afford to lose. Cryptocurrencies remain a largely unregulated space, which makes it very vulnerable to cyber thieves.
Now let's talk about Europe. It's where the world wants to spend their summer. But does Europe want all those tourists? Judging by the reactions of most cities, the answer is a loud no. Yesterday, protests broke out in Spain's Mallorca. 20,000 people asked tourists to get out. And it's not the only city that's saying this. Across Europe, over-tourism is a huge problem, but some cities like Copenhagen have taken a unique approach. Instead of turning away visitors, they're trying to lure them. Why is that? Our next report looks at the two sides of over-tourism.
On Sunday, tourists in Mallorca woke up to this. "20,000 people on the streets with posters asking tourists to go home." Mallorca is no stranger to this sight. In May, they witnessed a similar anti-tourism protest, but this time it was bigger.
Well, yes, we are here protesting because the situation is unsustainable. It is occurring outside our homes, and half of the houses and other things are increasing prices uncontrollably.
It's a protest not against tourism because I think it's not against tourism, but against these government policies that make us realize that we live on an island that has limits like we do, and the island can't grow in this way.
The Balearic Islands are an archipelago of eastern Spain. It has 3 main islands: Mallorca, Menorca and Ibiza. Last year, 17.8 million people visited the islands, and the figures are expected to be higher this year. But can the islands handle that? The residents don't think so. They say the current model is destroying the islands. It's stretching public services to a breaking point, harming natural resources and making local access to housing difficult.
Well, in the long run, we are tired of so much obsessive tourism. A tourism that is not worth it and does not benefit the island because we are selling it. And the worst thing is that we residents are paying the negative consequences of this excessive tourism.
And it's not the only over-tourism protests in Spain. There have been demonstrations in Malaga as well as on the Canary Islands. In Barcelona, tourists were sprayed with water guns. Now, Spain is the world's second most visited country. These places are tourist hotspots, but with every passing day, they are becoming more and more hostile. And it's not just a Spain phenomenon, Europe has a tourism phobia. Greece wants to keep crowds of tourists out. Croatia has imposed road bans. Amsterdam is banning cruises. Florence has banned short-term rentals. In Paris, tourist tax on hotel rooms are up by 200%. Portugal is charging tourists for antisocial behavior, like playing loud music and drinking on the streets at night. So local and state governments are under pressure. They need tourists to keep the economy running, but overrun cities and unhappy residents rarely make a good picture. But some nations like Denmark have a solution. While the rest of Europe wants tourists out, Copenhagen is offering rewards for tourists to visit. But there's a catch. Copenhagen doesn't want just any tourist, they want well-behaved travelers, those who are conscious of the environment. So the National Tourist Board has started a program. And it's sort of like a rewards scheme. If you ride a bike or take public transport or help clean rubbish or even bring reusable cups, you will be rewarded for your behavior. What do the rewards look like? It ranges from free coffees to complimentary cocktails. So the Danish capital has a unique solution. Reward tourists and they will behave better. But will it work for the rest of Europe? We don't know yet. But here's something we do know. By 2030, the world will have over 2 billion tourists. Countries will not be able to keep all of them out. So they might want to try other ways to deal with the problem of over-tourism.
To track some updates from the United States of America, this is another breaking input where Vice President Kamala Harris has now said that she was honored to receive President Biden's endorsement and intends to earn and win the nomination. So these are the latest inputs that we are tracking at this point of time, especially after President Joe Biden dropping out from the presidential race. Vice President Kamala Harris has said that she was honored to receive President Biden's endorsement and intends to earn and win the nomination. Well, Akanksha continues to stay with us on the broadcast. Akanksha, how does Kamala Harris plan to leverage this support, especially favoring the Democrats at this point of time after when... Yeah, go ahead.
You know, you've already talked about how she's in fact honored. The fact is that we've seen that tweet come out from Joe Biden yesterday where he has in fact extended all his support behind the vice president at the moment. And having said that, the only possible, there are multiple scenarios as we were telling you that they may conduct various forums, sanctioned forums across the country where you may have somebody also moderating those events. But the fact is that, you have had delegates who have been pledging their support behind Joe Biden. So in most likely the scenario, considering we've seen the US president sort of extend his support, sort of also cushion Kamala Harris's current standing, you may have that set of delegates who have in fact been supporting Joe Biden also extend their support behind Kamala Harris. Or you may, in fact, also have the Democrat National Convention, the DNC will be taking place in mid of August. You may have a voting that may take place over there. And it's very crucial right now for Joe Biden to also endorse a candidate, because that will sort of perhaps give more clarity to the rest of the
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The world's longest rowing boat is all set to take part in the Paris 2024 Olympic torch relay. Nigerian artist seeks world record for the largest drawing by an individual. And it looks like old habits often die hard. as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer accidentally calls Rishi Sunak Prime Minister in the Parliament.